Hey, still awake? Ever tried counting sheep and felt like the sheep were actually counting your failures instead? Yeah, me too. I'm Nietzsche, the guy with the wild mustache, the migraines, and a tiny mosquito in my beard who insists on reciting philosophy at 3 a.m. And if you're here, tossing and turning, feeling like your brain is plotting your downfall, you've come to the right place. Because tonight, we're not just going to survive insomnia. We're going to talk about how even the world's biggest overthinkers like me find confidence, even in the middle of cosmic chaos. I'm going to tell you my secrets, my embarrassments, my insane migraines, and how being a so-called genius didn't stop me from lying awake, convinced I was a cosmic fraud. And who knows, you might even laugh a bit before drifting off. So, if you love insomnia, existential dread, and philosophers with mustaches large enough to qualify as national monuments, go ahead and subscribe. I promise I won't keep you awake every night, or so I think. Anyway, let's get introductions out of the way. I'm Nietzsche, Friedrich, but let's keep it casual. Just call me Nietzsche. I'm the guy with the dramatic stare in all those black and white photos, the one people quote to sound deep at parties. God is dead. That's me, the man, the myth, the migraine, or so I think. But here's the secret nobody tells you. I don't sleep either. Tonight, I've been lying here, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember if I blew out my lamp or if my entire library is about to burst into flames. My brain spins faster than a hamster on triple espresso. My temples pound like Wagner's brass section on opening night. And somewhere in my beard, I'm pretty sure a mosquito is holding a philosophical debate about whether to bite me or not. You get my point, right? So, since we're both awake, how about we keep each other company tonight? Because here's something else they never mention in dusty textbooks. I've spent half my life wrestling with doubt, loneliness, and this relentless suspicion that maybe, just maybe, I'm the world's biggest fraud. Grand philosopher, they say. Visionary. Ha! Try living in my skull for one night, like right now. My pillow's too flat. My thoughts are too loud. And the mosquito in my beard? I'm convinced he's reading my notes on eternal recurrence. Anyway, back to business. I should probably tell you a bit about myself. I was born in 1844 in Rücken, a tiny village in Germany. My father was a Lutheran pastor, which means I was supposed to grow up preaching virtue and salvation. Instead, I ended up declaring that God is dead and accidentally scaring half of Europe. Funny how life turns out, right? When I was young, I was quite the overachiever. I devoured entire libraries, wrote moody poetry, played piano like a man possessed. People said I was a prodigy. But let's be real. Being called a prodigy mostly means people expect you to fix the entire universe before you've even grown a decent mustache. Speaking of which, my mustache? It's basically a small animal at this point. Don't trust it. It's just hiding existential dread. I went off to university in Bonn and Leipzig, dreaming of becoming a great scholar. By age 24, I was a professor of classical philology in Basel, Switzerland. Imagine that. At an age when most people today are still deciding which dating app to delete, I was teaching ancient Greek texts to Swiss students who'd rather be eating fondue and discussing cowbells. Or so I think. But here's the plot twist. I hated it. standing in front of a class lecturing about Greek grammar rules while my brain was screaming cosmic questions about existence, suffering, and why my shoes squeaked so loudly in the lecture hall. So eventually, I quit. No pension, no job security, just me, my books, my migraines, and the creeping feeling that I was about to become Europe's weirdest homeless man, dragging a library behind him. You get my point, right? And speaking of migraines, I should warn you, my friend, I was sick all the time. Headaches like thunder, vision that blurred for days, a stomach that revolted against everything from bread to a polite glass of water. Doctors told me to relax. Relax. It's not exactly easy to relax when you're convinced the entire universe is a chaotic dance of suffering and that nothing truly matters, except maybe writing one more book nobody reads. But listen, don't let that depress you, because I also believe fiercely that even inside all that chaos, there's beauty, there's possibility, and there's a reason I'm talking to you tonight. Because if there's one thing I've learned in these endless nights, it's this. Even the biggest philosophers lie awake wondering if they're good enough. Even the men who talk about the Übermensch sometimes curl up under their blankets whispering, "Why am I like this?" Or so I think. You ever feel like that? Like maybe you're faking it? Like you're just a few steps away from being exposed as a fraud? Let me tell you, my friend, so did I, all the time. So if you're lying there tonight, eyes wide open, fighting the same questions, you're in excellent company. Because that's what tonight is for. I'm going to tell you my story, my thoughts, my colossal failures, my wild hopes, my heartbreaks, my mustached tragedies, and maybe, just maybe, by the end of it, you'll realize that you too have far more strength inside you than you think. Because confidence, real confidence, isn't about swagger. It's not about being perfect or yelling louder than everyone else. It's about surviving your own thoughts at 3 a.m. It's about daring to look at yourself and say, yes, even like this, I have the right to exist, and maybe even shine. Or so I think. So if you're lying there, convinced that insomnia or a buzzing mosquito or that little voice in your head is going to ruin your night, stick with me. We're not letting any of that defeat us tonight. Together, we're going to wrestle those doubts to the floor and find some good old Nietzschean confidence, even if we do it in our pajamas. You get my point, right? I invite you now to close your eyes and begin this journey that will soon carry you into the arms of Morpheus. Hey, still awake? Tell me, ever feel like you were born 2 centuries too early or 2 centuries too late? Like maybe you'd fit in better wearing a toga in ancient Rome or running a meme page on TikTok instead of dealing with whatever century this is? Because me? I feel like that all the time. I'm Friedrich Nietzsche, remember? The guy who supposedly had it all figured out. Great thinker. Ahead of his time. Well, being ahead of your time mostly means no one in your time has the faintest clue what the hell you're talking about. Or so I think. All my life I felt misplaced, like I arrived at the wrong party. Everyone else is dancing to cheerful music, and I'm standing in the corner analyzing the lyrics for hidden nihilistic subtext. And don't even get me started on small talk. People say, "Lovely weather we're having," and I'm like, yes, but have you contemplated the abyss of existence lately? See, I wanted to fit in. Really, I did. But even as a child, I felt like the universe and I were slightly out of sync. Other kids were playing tag. I was memorizing Latin declensions and scribbling tragic poetry about imaginary Greek heroes. It's no wonder my classmates nicknamed me the Little Pastor. I mean, my father was a Lutheran pastor, so fair enough. But still, not exactly a nickname that gets you invited to cool parties. I remember being about 10 years old, sitting under a tree, scribbling verses about heroes dying noble deaths, while the other kids were busy building forts out of sticks and pretending to slay dragons. Meanwhile, my dragons were philosophical concepts like free will, which, let me tell you, does not win you many friends on the playground. The older I got, the worse it felt. Everyone seemed to be chasing money, power, polite society, while I was obsessed with questions like, why do we suffer? Why do we exist? Does existence itself have taste, like an overcooked schnitzel? And honestly, people didn't appreciate these conversation topics over dinner. They'd politely nod, then change the subject to the price of sausages or the weather. Fast forward a bit, and suddenly I'm 20-something teaching ancient Greek in Basel. Everyone around me seems normal. Married, polite, stable jobs. Meanwhile, I'm scribbling aphorisms about how all values must be reevaluated and how maybe God has left the chat. So yeah, born too early or too late, I have no idea. My colleagues in Basel would chat about academic politics, university budgets, and which lecture hall had the best heating. I'd be sitting there wondering if human beings were just elaborate puppets of blind cosmic forces. Not exactly a recipe for workplace friendships, and let me tell you, it's not just a 19th century problem. I look at your world today, and I'm pretty sure half of you feel exactly the same way. Scrolling endlessly on your phones, trying to figure out where you fit. Everyone screaming their opinions into the digital void. TikTok influencers selling 5 steps to happiness. Instagram reels insisting you should wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, drink green sludge, and become a millionaire by lunchtime. Meanwhile, you're just trying to keep your existential dread from leaking out during a Zoom call. I see you, my friend, hiding your cosmic panic behind polite smiles, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, nodding at conversations about productivity apps, while secretly wondering if existence has any inherent meaning at all. It's exhausting. Don't worry, I'm not judging, because I'd be the same. I mean, if I had TikTok in my time, I'd have probably posted cryptic videos saying, "Dance, even on your volcano," then stared intensely into the camera with my mustache trembling for dramatic effect, and gotten about 4 views. I think the real reason people like you and me feel out of place is because we're tuned into frequencies most people can't hear. We notice gaps in conversations, silences that stretch too long, contradictions nobody wants to acknowledge. Our minds spin in spirals, examining every layer of reality for hidden codes. You might call it being neurodivergent these days, or highly sensitive, or just cursed with an overactive philosophical brain. Whatever the label, it makes everyday life feel alien. And that alien feeling can get lonely. You sit in co-working spaces surrounded by chatter about quarterly targets, brunch spots, new shoes, and meanwhile you're thinking, is morality real? Or a social construct invented to keep us from panicking about the void? Trust me, I've been there. I've had dinner parties where I tried to steer the conversation toward the meaning of suffering only for my neighbors to develop a sudden, intense interest in their soup. But let me tell you something important, because It took me years of insomnia and migraines to figure this out. Being born out of time can feel isolating, but it's also a gift. It means you're a bridge between worlds. You can translate ideas from the past into the future. You're the messenger carrying sparks forward, even when no one seems to care. And sparks, my friend, have a way of lighting up dark rooms. I know, because I spent my life writing books nobody read. Seriously, my first few books sold so few copies, I'm pretty sure my mustache had more fans than I did, and I'm convinced the mosquito in my beard has read more of my books than half of Germany did back then. And yet, look at me now. People still talk about me, quote me, misquote me, meme me. They tattoo my words on their ribs, even if they're not entirely sure what those words mean. Sometimes I imagine someone flexing in the mirror, showing off my quote on their biceps, completely unaware that I wrote it during a week-long migraine while surviving on black coffee and despair. So if tonight, lying there wide awake, you feel like the world's moving on without you, remember this. The world needs people who see things differently, who refuse to fit neatly into the timelines, expectations, or algorithmic boxes. Because that's how new ideas are born. New art, new ways of living, and yes, new confidence. Because confidence isn't about fitting in, it's about daring to stand alone for a while until the world catches up, or deciding you don't care if it ever does. And if you ever feel too alone, well, just remember you've got me, and possibly the mosquito, who, by the way, seems to be reciting Zerahustra again. So, still awake? Good, because next I'm going to tell you how one day I decided I'd rather face poverty and endless migraines than keep pretending to love my job. Let's talk about quitting everything and a certain grumpy philosopher named Schopenhauer. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever wanted to quit your job on a Monday morning purely because the coffee tasted like despair and cardboard? Yeah, been there, done that. Burn the bridges. I know what you're thinking. Nietzsche. Weren't you a big brain philosopher guy? Surely you loved your job. Ha! Let me tell you a secret. For a few years, I had what looked like a respectable career. Professor of classical philology at the University of Basel. Fancy title, nice salary. People called me Herr Professor. I wore a suit. I carried important-looking papers. I even tried growing into my mustache, though it kept looking like an angry ferret on my lip. But the truth? I hated it. Every single day. I'd stand in front of my students, lecturing about Greek grammar rules and obscure tragedies, while my brain was screaming, "Why are we here? What is the point? Also, why do my shoes squeak so loudly in this lecture hall?" It's a weird feeling, looking successful on the outside, while wanting to vanish into thin air on the inside. My colleagues thought I was brilliant. The university was proud of me. Meanwhile, I was plotting my escape like some philosopher version of Houdini. And let me tell you, quitting wasn't exactly the done thing in my time. People stayed in their jobs until retirement or death, whichever came first. But I couldn't stand it anymore. My health was collapsing. My migraines were so bad, I'd see flashing lights and feel like Wagner's entire orchestra was performing inside my skull. Speaking of Wagner, he'd probably have written an opera about me quitting my job, complete with a chorus screaming, "He's free!" and at least 17 tubas. So one day, I just left, walked away. No pension, no safety net, no plan, just me, my books, and my ever-complaining stomach, or so I think. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved ancient Greek, I still do. Give me a dusty scroll in a quiet room, and I'm happy as a mustache in a windstorm. But standing there, pretending to care about trivial grammar rules when I was obsessed with cosmic chaos and the death of God, well, that was pure torture. And here's where it gets interesting, because you might think this whole existential meltdown was entirely my own invention. But honestly, I blame a certain someone. His name was Arthur Schopenhauer, dramatic, moody, brilliant, and possibly the world's biggest pessimist. Schopenhauer's philosophy was like a black hole sucking all the joy out of the room. He believed life was just endless suffering, driven by a blind will, some cosmic force that makes us desire things we can never truly have. Happiness, he said, was merely the brief pause between miseries. Cheerful, right? Perfect reading material for a teenager with a migraine. I read Schopenhauer as a young man, and suddenly the whole world seemed like one giant cosmic joke. Why strive? Why work? Why do anything if everything ends in disappointment and suffering? At first it felt oddly comforting, like, it's not just me, life really is a disaster. But eventually it became suffocating, because if you believe suffering is inevitable, where do you find the courage to keep going, to build, to dream, to create? And that's where confidence comes in, because I realized something crucial. And I want you to remember this tonight, lying there staring at the ceiling. Confidence doesn't mean never doubting. It means daring to act anyway, even when your doubts are screaming louder than Wagner's tubas. Or so I think. Leaving my job was terrifying. People thought I'd lost my mind. Some said I was destined for obscurity, or worse, for poverty and madness. And to be fair, they weren't entirely wrong. My health got worse. My books barely sold. I wandered from city to city, hoping different climates would cure my migraines. They didn't. The only consistent thing in my life was the mustache, and possibly the mosquito in my beard who kept me company on lonely nights. But I'll tell you something, I don't regret leaving, because the day I quit was the first day I felt honest, like I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't performing. I was finally free to follow my questions wherever they led, even if it meant ending up in a cheap boarding house, scribbling aphorisms nobody wanted to publish. I know your world today isn't much different. You've got bullshit jobs, as some call them, endless Zoom meetings, corporate jargon, pretending to care about synergy and quarterly targets when your soul is screaming for meaning. You sit there smiling politely, thinking, is this it? Is this all I'm supposed to be? Let me tell you, it's okay to question it all. It's okay to admit that the coffee isn't strong enough to drown out your existential crisis. Because maybe that crisis is the start of something true. Maybe it's the crack that lets a bit of light in, or so I think. So, if you're still awake tonight, wondering if you're stuck in the wrong job, wrong life, wrong century, know that you're not alone. I've been there, left it all behind, and somehow, even with the migraines, the mustache, and the mosquito reciting Zerahustra in my beard, I found moments of clarity, beauty, and yes, confidence. But speaking of mustaches, next, I want to tell you why there's so much more to me than just the giant thing growing on my face, and why sometimes a mustache can be both a disguise and a cry for help. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever notice how people sum you up with just one dumb thing, like your hair or your laugh, or that one time you accidentally replied all to the office email chain and now you're that guy? Me? I got reduced to one thing, my mustache. Seriously, my entire public identity has become a giant patch of hair above my lip. People look at my portraits and go, ah yes, Nietzsche, the mustache guy. Never mind that I wrote entire books about human suffering, freedom, and the abyss staring back at us. Nope, just the mustache, or so I think. Don't get me wrong, I love a good mustache joke as much as the next guy. Mine is practically a national monument. It's so big it should probably pay rent on my face. But still, it gets tiring being reduced to a single detail. Because here's the truth. I'm more than just facial hair. A lot more. People imagine me as this stern, brooding philosopher, gazing into infinity like I'm about to drop cosmic secrets. But reality, half the time I was trying not to throw up from migraines, or stressing over whether I'd sell more than 12 copies of my latest book. Also, fun fact, I laughed. A lot. Philosophers aren't these grim statues people think we are. I cracked jokes, played piano, wrote music badly, and sang so loudly my neighbors would bang on the walls. And let's not even discuss my mild obsession with spicy mustard. But none of that shows up in history books. Instead, people slap my face on memes with captions like, "God is dead," as though I said it purely for shock value. I swear, if I'd known the internet was coming, I'd have written catchier slogans. Something short enough for a Twitter bio. But it's not just me, right? The same thing happens to you. People pick one detail about you and decide that's your whole story. Maybe it's your job title, or your weight, or your Instagram aesthetic, or that one time you fell asleep during a Zoom call with your camera on. Welcome to the human condition. Your world today has made this even worse. Social media shrinks all of us into profile pictures and tiny bios. You curate perfect feeds, crop out the chaos, slap a filter on your life, and pretend to be eternally confident and productive. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you're eating cereal for dinner and Googling, "Am I dying or just stressed?" I remember once someone called me the madman with the mustache in a review. That's it. No mention of my philosophy. No mention of my years of teaching or my obsession with Greek tragedy. Just the madman with the mustache. And I thought, well, I guess it's shorter than the philosopher who probably overthinks everything and occasionally converses with a mosquito in his beard. Part of me admires the creativity of your time, the memes, the reels, the digital art. But another part of me worries you're drowning in curated perfection, constantly measuring yourself by likes, followers, and whether your mustache looks symmetrical on video calls. It's exhausting trying to be one perfect version of yourself all the time. Here's the truth I want you to remember tonight. You are not your mustache, or your job title, or your weight, or that awkward thing you said 3 years ago. You're infinitely more than any single label. Confidence isn't about crafting a perfect image. It's about being able to say, here I am, flawed, weird, loud, quiet, mustache or no mustache. This is me. When I was alive, critics tore me apart. Some called me insane, immoral, or just downright incomprehensible. A few reviewers said my writing was too poetic, which frankly I took as a compliment. And yet, even with all that criticism, I kept writing. Not because I thought I was perfect, but because I believed my voice mattered, even if no one was listening. Was I confident all the time? Absolutely not. Some days I felt like a genius. Other days I felt like a fraud hiding behind a giant mustache and a pile of scribbled notes. I'd look in the mirror, see my mustache twitching like it had secrets of its own, and wonder if anyone would ever really understand me. But I kept going, because deep down, I believed there was value in being real, even if that realness was messy, migraine-filled, and occasionally punctuated by a mosquito-buzzing philosophical nonsense in my beard. And let's talk about that mustache for a second. It wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a sort of shield. When people stared at it, they didn't look quite as deeply into my eyes. It gave me something to hide behind, a distraction, a mask. And sometimes, when you're carrying thoughts as heavy as mine, you crave a mask, even if it's made of hair. Your world today has perfected the art of masks. Digital avatars, carefully curated captions, group photos where you crop out the ex-friend who betrayed you, filters that smooth your skin and your mood all at once. But masks, no matter how beautifully designed, eventually crack. And beneath them, there's always a real human, trembling and luminous, waiting to be seen. So, if you're lying there tonight, staring at perfect photos of perfect people with perfect lives, remember, they have their own chaos too. Everyone has their mosquitoes. And yes, mine is still here, probably rehearsing Wagner's operas in my facial hair. Anyway, speaking of misunderstandings, that brings me to one of the biggest of my career, a certain prophet I invented, who everyone seems to quote but almost nobody understands. His name? Zerahustra. But that's a story for our next sleepless moment. So, let's talk about Zerahustra, because I swear, if I see one more quote of mine floating around the internet completely misunderstood, it's usually something I wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. First of all, Zarathustra wasn't me. People think I was writing about myself in disguise, like some weird 19th century influencer trying to launch a personal brand. Nope. Zarathustra was my fictional prophet, my cosmic messenger, my bearded mountain-loving guy who comes down to humanity to share some uncomfortable truths. But let's back up a bit. See, I wrote Zarathustra because I was tired of philosophers sounding like legal contracts, tired of dry essays. I wanted to write philosophy like music, like poetry, like Wagner's operas, except with fewer tubas and much shorter intermissions, or so I think. And I thought, who better to deliver my wildest ideas than a prophet? Someone who speaks in riddles, parables, and dramatic metaphors. Someone who'd make people think, wait, is he serious? Or is this just cosmic stand-up comedy? So I invented Zarathustra. He climbs mountains, talks to animals, gives cryptic speeches about the Übermensch, eternal recurrence, and how humanity needs to outgrow its old beliefs. But oh boy, people didn't know what to do with it. Some thought it was a religious text, others thought I was starting a cult. One guy even accused me of being possessed, and I'm pretty sure the mosquito in my beard still hasn't finished reading it either. The thing is, Zarathustra isn't about being some perfect superhero. It's about becoming who you are, breaking free from what the crowd expects, daring to create your own values when the old ones feel empty. Sound familiar? It should, because that's exactly what so many of you are wrestling with today. Your world is full of influencers preaching authenticity, but often selling you the same glossy version of happiness. Meanwhile, true confidence, the kind that lets you stand apart, feels like an endangered species. But here's the truth I discovered. You can't wait for the world to tell you who you are. You have to declare it yourself, even if it's weird, even if people misunderstand you, even if your mustache looks ridiculous while you're saying it. Or so I think. I mean, imagine Zerahustra on TikTok. One video he's shouting, "God is dead." The next he's dancing to a trending sound while holding a snake and an eagle. Would he go viral? Probably. Would anyone actually understand him? Doubtful. Writing Zerahustra nearly broke me. I poured everything into it, my doubts, my hopes, my laughter, my heartbreaks. It was my attempt to sing the deepest truths I knew, even if nobody wanted to listen. And here's something you might not know. It didn't sell. Not at first. My publisher printed just a few hundred copies. They sat gathering dust while I was alone, sick, and convinced I'd wasted my life. But I'd do it all again. Because I wasn't writing to be popular. I was writing for whoever might wake up one sleepless night, feeling utterly alone, and discover a friend in those pages. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice, speaking honestly, to remind you you're not insane for feeling different. So if you're lying there tonight, wondering if you're too weird, too much, too intense, remember, you're in good company. Me, Zerahustra, and yes, probably the mosquito, who I'm pretty sure is currently delivering his own sermon somewhere near my left ear. So if you're lying there tonight, wondering if you're too weird, too much, too intense, remember, you're in good company. Me, Zerahustra, and yes, probably the mosquito, who I'm pretty sure is currently delivering his own sermon somewhere near my left ear. Anyway, speaking of feeling like the odd one out, I should probably tell you about what it's like to feel like the only human in a room full of aliens. Because trust me, that's a feeling I know far too well. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever feel like you're the only human in a room full of aliens? Like everyone else got the instruction manual for life, and you're sitting there wondering which fork to use, why people laugh at certain jokes, and whether you're the only one who hears the cosmic buzzing in the silence? Because me? That's basically been my entire existence. I mean, I'm Nietzsche. People think I must have felt like the center of every room, confident, bold, ready to drop my philosophical mic and leave everyone speechless. But truth is, I've spent most of my life feeling like I landed on the wrong planet, or so I think. Even back when I was a professor, I'd sit in meetings surrounded by colleagues politely discussing grammar rules or which Latin poet to teach next semester. Meanwhile, my brain was screaming about eternal recurrence, the collapse of morality, and whether Wagner's latest opera was secretly about me. I'd look around and think, does nobody else see how absurd all this is? Or am I the only alien here? It's a strange kind of loneliness, feeling your thoughts spin 5 layers deeper than the conversation around you. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm smarter, just wired differently, sensitive to nuance, obsessed with meaning, convinced there's a mosquito in my beard plotting the overthrow of my entire philosophy. As a kid, I already felt it. Other children were outside playing tag, screaming and laughing, while I was inside reading tragedies, writing poetry, and pondering why gods always seemed so angry in Greek myths. By the time I was 12, I'd memorized chunks of Latin, which is a guaranteed way to make yourself deeply unpopular at school. My classmates were comparing marbles. I was comparing philosophical systems. I'd try to share my brilliant discoveries, and they'd look at me like I'd just started speaking Martian. And honestly, that difference can isolate you, especially when the people you thought were your tribe drift away. Take Wagner. We were inseparable once, two cosmic troublemakers dreaming of transforming humanity through art. We'd spend hours discussing music, myth, and the future of civilization. But Wagner became, well, Wagner. All drama, all the time. Velvet coats. 20-minute monologues about how brass sections could save civilization. And eventually, our paths split. It broke my heart. Because for a while, he was the only person who seemed to understand how intense my inner world felt. I thought we'd change the world together. Instead, I ended up alone in a dark room, cursing the echo of Wagner's brass instruments in my skull, while the mosquito in my beard tried to conduct an imaginary orchestra. And then there was loose Salame. But that's a tornado of feelings we'll save for later. Anyway, here's the thing. If you feel like an alien sometimes, you're not alone. Your world might be different from mine. Co-working spaces instead of candlelit studies, Slack messages instead of handwritten letters, but I see the same struggle. You sit in open offices where people chatter about weekend plans, sports scores, or new productivity apps. And meanwhile, you're quietly wondering about mortality, truth, or why existence sometimes tastes like burnt toast. Or you scroll social media and think, is it just me? Or does everyone else know how to be normal? Some of you are hypersensitive, neurodivergent. You hear the music under the noise. You notice every micro-expression, every silence that stretches too long. You're intense, passionate, and yeah, sometimes you feel like a glitch in the matrix. There were moments, even during my lectures, when I'd see the blank faces of my students and think, I'm speaking words, but they're hearing white noise. I'd launch into a brilliant explanation about the tragic worldview of the Greeks, only to notice someone doodling tiny mustaches on the edge of their notes. Once, a student fell asleep so deeply during my talk on Heraclitus that he started snoring loudly. I pretended it was an example of cosmic unity. But here's what I learned in all those sleepless nights. Confidence doesn't mean blending in. It doesn't mean learning how to small talk about the weather. Confidence is daring to accept that you might always feel a bit alien, and that maybe, just maybe, that's your gift. Because the world needs aliens. It needs people who see differently, feel deeply, ask questions everyone else is afraid to ask, even if it makes conversations awkward at dinner parties, even if you're the one staring out the window, wondering if your entire life is just one long overture to Wagner's next opera. Or so I think. And let me tell you, being different doesn't doom you to loneliness forever. I found people who understood parts of me, even if those friendships sometimes exploded in Wagnerian drama. And even if some of those connections left me limping away with a philosophical migraine. Sometimes I look at your modern world and wonder how I'd survive it. Would I be the weird guy in the co-working space muttering about the abyss into his oat latte? Or the guy on social media dropping cryptic one-liners that get precisely 3 likes and 1 confused comment from a distant cousin? Probably. But I'd still be me. And I'd hope that, somewhere out there, another alien would read my words and feel a little less alone. So, if you're lying there tonight, thinking you're the only human in a room full of aliens, breathe. You're not alone. You've got me, and possibly the mosquito, who's now pacing around my mustache like he's preparing to give a TED Talk on nihilism. Speaking of intense connections, next, I have to tell you about the woman who practically rewrote the script of my emotional life. Her name was Salame, and trust me, that story comes with fireworks. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever confessed your love and heard, thanks, but no thanks? Because there's nothing quite like lying awake at 3 a.m., replaying a rejection in your mind like it's the greatest hits of heartbreak. Insomnia is one thing, but insomnia mixed with heartbreak is an entirely new form of cosmic torture. Trust me. I've been there. Her name was Salame. Brilliant, fearless, magnetic. The kind of woman who could glance at you once and know your entire psychological blueprint. She was younger than me, spoke 5 languages, wrote essays for fun, and could debate philosophy faster than most people can tie their shoelaces. Lou wasn't just clever, she sparkled with this electric curiosity, like someone who genuinely wanted to understand every layer of the universe. And me? I fell for her harder than a philosopher tripping over his own footnotes. It all started innocently enough. We'd meet, talk for hours, laugh about everything from poetry to metaphysics. Sometimes she'd tilt her head and ask me impossible questions like, "Do you think music can save humanity?" And I'd get tongue-tied, staring at her and mumbling about Wagner and brass sections. I thought, finally, someone who understands the chaos in my head. I was convinced we were destined to be an unstoppable intellectual duo, Nietzsche and Lou, rewriting the rules of love and philosophy, one existential crisis at a time. So naturally, I did what any rational man would do. I wrote her letters, long letters, dramatic letters, the kind that practically scream, "I'm overthinking this," and also possibly proposing marriage. I poured out my thoughts on suffering, truth, eternal recurrence, and also how her hair looked like poetry under certain kinds of light. And Lou? Well, Lou replied warmly, politely, always with an affection that made me think, this is it. But there was always a certain distance, a careful line she never crossed. One day, I finally confessed how deeply I felt for her, and Lou, with all her grace and intelligence, gave me the philosophical version of, it's not you, it's me. Except, let's be honest, it was definitely me. She said she admired my mind, cherished our friendship, but didn't see us as lovers. She wanted a spiritual friendship. And my poor mustache practically drooped in despair. It's strange how rejection can feel like both a precise knife and a dull ache, because it wasn't just romantic rejection. Lou had made me believe for a brief shining moment that I wasn't alone in my cosmic weirdness. And then, suddenly, I was. Again. You know that feeling, right? When you're sure you've finally found your person, the one who sees you truly, and then, poof, gone, or friend-zoned, or left on red for 3 months while they figure themselves out. Modern heartbreaks aren't so different. You've got Tinder matches who vanish into thin air, Instagram crushes who block you overnight, people who say, "I'm not ready for a relationship," only to post couples' selfies 2 weeks later. And there you are, lying in bed at 2 a.m., eating cold pizza straight from the box, scrolling through memes that somehow make the heartbreak worse instead of better. I remember once Lou and I took a trip to the mountains. She wanted to breathe clearer air, and I wanted to impress her with how rugged and philosophical I could look while standing on a cliff. Instead, I got a migraine so intense I thought I was seeing visions of Dionysus. Lou just smiled gently, handed me a scarf, and said, "You know, Friedrich, sometimes your mind needs to rest." I wanted to tell her that my mind never rests, that it's like a circus of dancing thoughts, loud music, and a mosquito in my beard giving lectures on nihilism. But instead, I just nodded and tried not to throw up on my boots. Or so I think. Here's what Lou taught me. Confidence doesn't mean you'll never get hurt. It means surviving heartbreak and daring to love again anyway. It's knowing that rejection doesn't define your worth, no matter how cosmic your heartbreak feels. And let's be honest, I wasn't exactly the smoothest man alive. Between my migraines, my tendency to rant about metaphysics at dinner, and a mustache big enough to hide small philosophical treatises, I probably wasn't prime romantic material. But that doesn't mean I wasn't worthy of love, and neither are you. Lou went on to become a writer, a psychoanalyst, an intellectual celebrity in her own right. She crossed paths with Rilke, Freud, and half the great minds of Europe. And me? Well, I went back to scribbling aphorisms, arguing with the mosquito in my beard, and pretending I didn't care. Sometimes I even convinced myself I was better off alone, that my ideas needed solitude to grow. But the truth is, I missed her. I missed the way she challenged me, the way she made me laugh, the way she made me feel a little less alien in a world that often felt too loud and too shallow. Did I ever get over her? Mostly. Probably. Except sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what might have been if she'd just said yes, and if my mustache would have looked more majestic standing next to hers in wedding portraits. So, if you're lying there tonight, haunted by someone who slipped through your fingers, remember, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means your story isn't finished yet. Heartbreak can bruise your confidence, but it doesn't have to erase it. And sometimes the deepest wounds are the places where new light gets in. Speaking of my mind never resting, next I have to talk to you about another battle I've fought every single night of my life. My own brain. Racing thoughts, endless loops, and the desperate wish for a giant cosmic mute button. Because, believe me, my mind never shuts up. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever wished you had a remote control for your mind? Like a big cosmic mute button? The kind you could point at your thoughts and just press off, if only for 5 minutes of silence. Because if there's one thing worse than insomnia, it's insomnia fueled by an overactive brain, throwing a rave in your skull at 3 a.m. Trust me, I'd know. My mind never shuts up. It spins and loops and runs in circles like a hamster on too much espresso. Even when I'm lying in bed hoping for sleep, I'm thinking, what if eternal recurrence is real? Did I leave the lamp burning? Is existence secretly shaped like a pretzel? And also, why does my mustache feel heavier on the left side tonight? And it's not just the big philosophical stuff. It's the tiny, absurd details that latch on to my brain like burrs on a hiking cloak. A phrase someone said 10 years ago. A conversation I should have handled differently. The fact that there's possibly a mosquito in my beard preparing his doctoral thesis on nihilism. Or so I think. I remember entire nights when I'd try to sleep, but instead my brain would start reciting passages from my own books back to me, except out of order, with random words swapped for vegetables. Like, he who has a why to live can endure any broccoli. Which is not the vibe I was going for. It's exhausting. And yet, strangely, part of me thrives on it. Because sometimes, amid the mental chaos, sparks of insight appear. Ideas that feel so alive I have to scramble for a pen, terrified I'll lose them forever if I fall asleep. The best and worst part of being me is that my brain never stops trying to figure things out. Modern life isn't helping you much, I imagine. Your world is built to keep minds buzzing, notifications pinging, messages popping up, news feeds scrolling infinitely. You've got mindfulness apps reminding you to breathe. Except the reminders themselves become one more thing on your mental to-do list. You lie in bed, phone glowing inches from your face, scrolling through videos of raccoons stealing donuts, while your brain whispers, shouldn't you be doing something meaningful with your life? Meanwhile, your other inner voice is like, shh, one more raccoon video. People think philosophers must be calm, serene creatures who spend hours meditating in silence. Ha! If only. My inner monologue sounds like a shouting match between a Greek chorus, a German opera, and a slightly neurotic librarian demanding everyone lower their voices. And let's not even discuss how my thoughts loop back to the same worries over and over again. Will my work matter? Am I destined to die forgotten? Should I have eaten that second baklava? Existential crises and pastry regrets. A classic Nietzsche combo. Here's the irony. We all crave quiet, but sometimes silence terrifies us. Because in the silence, there's nothing to distract us from ourselves. No screens, no small talk, just you and your thoughts. And let's be honest, sometimes your thoughts are the scariest place on earth. But here's the secret I've learned after years of insomnia and enough migraines to warrant my own medical textbook. Confidence isn't about silencing your mind completely. It's about learning to live alongside your mind's noise without letting it define you. It's about recognizing the difference between useful thoughts and those endless echoes that only spin you into anxiety. It's being able to say, yes, brain, I hear you, but I'm not going to follow you down that rabbit hole right now. There were nights I'd stand by the window, looking out at the stars, trying to remind myself that the universe is vast, and my worries, though loud, are small in comparison. I'd breathe in the cold air, hoping to find stillness, even as my temples pulsed like Wagner's brass section. I wish I could give you a perfect trick to silence your mind, but I can't. Anyone who claims to have a magic solution is probably trying to sell you an app, or worse, a subscription. But I can tell you this, you're not broken because you think too much. You're not defective because your brain refuses to power down at night. The same mind that keeps you awake is also the one capable of imagining, creating, and seeing beauty where others see nothing. So if you're lying there tonight, exhausted by the noise in your head, know that you're not alone. I'm right there with you, along with the mosquito in my beard who's currently suggesting I write a sequel to Thus Spoke Zerahustra, called Thus Buzzed the Mosquito. And if you ever do find that cosmic mute button, Please let me know. Speaking of questioning everything, next, I should probably confess the night I decided to kill God. Casual, right? But that's a whole other story. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever felt like blowing up the entire rule book, including God? I know that's a pretty intense thought for the middle of the night, but welcome to my brain. It doesn't exactly come with a low volume setting. People love to quote me saying God is dead. They slap it on memes, t-shirts, tattoos. I've seen it printed on coffee mugs right next to smiling cartoon suns. And every time I want to yell, that's not quite what I meant. Because, spoiler, I didn't mean I'd personally stabbed God in an alley somewhere. I wasn't running around with a philosophical dagger screaming down with the Almighty. My mustache might have been dramatic, but I wasn't that dramatic, or so I think. What I was really talking about was this. The old ways of thinking about truth, morality, and meaning were collapsing. The beliefs that held society together for centuries were losing their grip. People were starting to doubt, to question everything, including whether there was any divine order behind it all. God is dead wasn't just about religion. It was about the terrifying freedom and burden that comes when the old structures crumble. Suddenly, we humans were left alone in the cosmos, staring at each other like, so, what now? It's a bit like waking up one day to find your phone deleted all your contacts and your GPS doesn't work anymore. Except, on a cosmic scale. Here's the funny part. People always think I was gleeful about declaring God dead, like I was popping philosophical champagne. But the truth, it scared me too. Because when the old certainties die, you're left in a vast silence. No celestial rulebook, no guarantees, just us and the weight of inventing our own values. And you might think this was a 19th century problem, but honestly, your world today is living through the same chaos. Look around. Politics imploding. Trust in institutions fading. Everyone arguing about what's real and what's fake news. People canceling each other, remaking entire moral systems overnight. It's as if God is dead has gone digital. Sometimes I wonder how I'd have handled Twitter. Probably terribly. I'd post, God is dead, and wake up the next day to 5 million notifications, half calling me brilliant, the other half threatening to block me for life. And the mosquito in my beard would be buzzing, told you so. But here's the thing, even though it's terrifying, this emptiness is also freedom. Once the old gods fall silent, we get to ask, what do we really believe? What kind of world do we want to build? And who do we want to be in it? That's the part people forget. When I said God is dead, I wasn't saying life has no meaning. I was saying now it's up to us to create meaning, to become strong enough, brave enough to invent our own values instead of borrowing someone else's. It's the ultimate act of confidence, to look into the void and say, fine, I'll write the rules myself. But I won't lie to you, it's exhausting. It's way easier to have a cosmic parent telling you right from wrong, comforting you with stories and rituals. It's far scarier to realize that the meaning of your life might be entirely in your hands. And let's face it, some days I'd have preferred just staying in bed, pulling my mustache over my eyes and pretending none of it was my problem. Still, I kept writing, I kept pushing, because I believed that if we dared to confront the emptiness, we could transform it into possibility, into art, into laughter, into new ways of being human. That's why I talk about the Übermensch, not some superhero in a cape, but a person who creates their own values, who's able to dance on the edge of chaos without being destroyed by it. Modern life gives you 1,000 reasons to feel lost. Algorithms trying to predict your every desire. Influencers selling you the perfect life. News feeds screaming that everything's falling apart. And in the middle of it all, you. Here's my advice. Don't wait for someone else to hand you meaning on a platter. Don't cling to old beliefs that no longer fit. Dare to invent your own, even if your mustache is crooked, even if your mosquito won't shut up about Nietzsche and nihilism, even if people misunderstand you. Because confidence isn't about having all the answers. It's about standing your ground in the face of cosmic silence and deciding you'll keep dancing anyway. And if you're lying there tonight, wondering whether anything matters, let me tell you this. It does, because you're here, thinking, feeling, wanting to make sense of it all. And that, my friend, is the spark that keeps the cosmos from collapsing into pure chaos. Speaking of collapsing, next, I should probably tell you how my own body tried to betray me repeatedly. Migraines, stomach pains, my personal opera of suffering. Because, trust me, philosophy might mess with your head, but your body can put on quite a show of its own. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever feel like your own body is your worst enemy? Like you're trapped in some cosmic sitcom where your brain wants to write profound philosophy, but your stomach decides it's time for a 5-alarm meltdown? Welcome to my life. People think I'm all intellect, the great philosopher, the mustache, the cosmic thinker. What they don't see is that half the time I was curled up in bed, clutching my temples and whispering curses at the ceiling. I've been sick most of my life. Migraines so violent they made me see flashing lights, taste metallic bitterness, and hear imaginary orchestras tuning up for Wagner's next opera. My stomach, meanwhile, was a perpetual diva, sensitive, dramatic, prone to launching full-scale protests over the mildest foods. Even my eyes betrayed me. Bright lights would trigger waves of nausea so intense, I once wondered if my mustache might detach itself and flee in search of calmer terrain. Or so I think. My doctors in Basel were very diligent. They prescribed me countless treatments, cold compresses, strange herbal concoctions, electric therapies that involved wires and buzzing machines. One doctor even suggested I try taking more walks in the fresh air, as though a gentle stroll through the Swiss countryside could silence Wagner's brass section pounding inside my skull. Don't get me wrong, I love fresh air. But the Alps are less therapeutic when you're doubled over on a hiking trail, vomiting up your philosophical breakfast. Some days, my entire existence shrank down to pain. Pain in my head, pain in my gut, pain in my nerves. I'd lie in bed thinking, is this it? Is this my destiny? To become the philosopher best known for migraines and existential dread? And yet, somehow, I kept going. You know what's funny? For all your modern advances, you're not so different. You got Google at your fingertips, ready to convince you that every symptom means imminent death. A headache? Brain tumor? Tummy ache? Probably an alien parasite. And suddenly, it's 3 a.m, and you're reading medical forums posted by strangers named Yoga Bunny 92. Meanwhile, your doctors tell you you're fine, but your body insists otherwise. Fatigue that won't leave, weird twinges in your chest, random spells of dizziness that make you wonder if you're becoming the main character in a tragic opera. Let me tell you, I see you, and I wish I could say I mastered it. I didn't. My health always felt like a cosmic joke, a body so frail, stuck hosting a mind that refused to stop spinning. It's like stuffing a hurricane into a paper bag. Some nights, the pain would be so sharp that I'd pace my room for hours, talking to the mosquito in my beard, asking him if perhaps he knew a cure for chronic migraines. He never answered, though he seemed sympathetic, which I suppose counts for something. But here's the truth I learned through it all. Confidence doesn't come from having a perfect body. It comes from refusing to let your body's betrayals define your entire existence. I used to think I couldn't be a true philosopher because I was physically weak, that I needed to be robust and powerful like the ancient Greeks I studied. But slowly I realized that wisdom often grows in precisely those fragile places where we think we're broken. My suffering forced me inward. It taught me patience, even when I hated it. It taught me how fleeting everything is, the good and the bad. It forced me to invent new ways to stay alive in my mind, even when my body tried to drag me down, or so I think. And yes, I still raged. I threw fits. I cursed my body in every language I knew. There were days I was certain I was dying. Days when I wished I could just trade my entire nervous system for a sturdy ox cart and call it a day. But then there were other days. Days when I'd look out the window and see the snow glittering on the rooftops and feel just for a moment that I could bear it all. That even in this frail shell there was still something burning bright inside me. Something worth fighting for. So if you're lying there tonight, your body aching in places you didn't know existed, feeling betrayed by flesh and bone, remember, you're not just your symptoms. You're not your fatigue, your diagnosis, or the number of pills in your bathroom cabinet. You're the spark that's still shining despite it all. And speaking of sparks, next, I have to tell you about the one thing that sometimes saved me from the worst nights: music. Article, The Strange Miracle of Beauty, that, even for a few moments, made me feel truly alive. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever heard a cheesy song and it totally saved your day? You know the kind I mean. The song you'd never admit you love, but when it comes on, your entire soul starts tap dancing. Even if it's ridiculous. Even if it's a disco anthem from the 70s. Trust me, I get it. People think philosophers only care about logic, concepts, metaphysical questions. They imagine us living in silent rooms, surrounded by dusty books, pondering eternity. But let me tell you, music kept me sane. Or at least, as sane as a man who declared God dead could be. I've always been obsessed with music, even tried composing some myself, though I'll admit my melodies were more likely to send people fleeing than to inspire standing ovations. My piano playing, loud, passionate, and absolutely terrible. My neighbors used to bang on the walls in protest, which I like to believe was applause. Music saved me, over and over. During my worst nights, when migraines crushed my skull and despair whispered that nothing mattered, a single piece of music could pierce the darkness. Even Wagner, though he's also partly responsible for half my migraines. I remember one winter night in Basel. Snow fell silently outside my window. I felt so alone, I thought my chest might crack open. My brain was rattling with worries about whether anyone would ever read my books, whether my life meant anything at all, whether the mustache had become the only memorable part of my existence. Then I put on an opera, and for a few precious minutes, I was transported. The violin soared, the human voice rose above pain, and the world felt vast and beautiful again. Or so I think. Music doesn't erase suffering, but sometimes it lifts you above it, gives you breathing room, reminds you that life, however messy, still holds flashes of wonder. And you know what? Your world is no different. Sure, your music comes from tiny glowing screens and endless playlists with names like moody existential vibes or songs to pretend you're main character, but the effect is the same. I imagine some of you lying awake right now with your headphones in, listening to a Spotify algorithm trying to soothe your soul. And sometimes it works. A single song slides into your ears, and suddenly the weight lifts off your chest just enough to remember that you're still here, that you're still human, that maybe tomorrow doesn't have to be so terrifying. That's art's power. People think confidence comes from toughness, from becoming impervious to pain, but I've learned that sometimes confidence is letting yourself be vulnerable enough to feel beauty, even when your life feels like it's falling apart. I know my reputation doesn't exactly scream sensitive music lover. People see me scowling in portraits, mustache bristling, eyes full of cosmic angst. They don't picture me humming along to an aria or tearing up at a quiet violin solo. But that's the truth. Art cracked open the armor I tried so hard to wear. It made me remember that being human means feeling everything. The joy, the sorrow, the unbearable tenderness that hits you out of nowhere. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and imagine a world where every sorrow was transformed into music, where every heartbreak became a melody, every doubt turned into a crescendo of strings. And in those moments, I believed that nothing was wasted, not even the pain. Your world, for all its chaos, still has this same magic. You got music, movies, paintings, even silly memes that make you laugh when you thought laughter was extinct. Never underestimate how art can save you, even for a moment. And yes, sometimes the things that save us are absurd. A catchy pop song, a ridiculous dance video, a painting that makes no sense except it stirs something in your chest. Let yourself be stirred. Let yourself be cracked open. That's where real confidence comes from. It's not about building walls. It's about letting beauty sneak through the cracks. And if you're lying there tonight, convinced your life has become an endless scroll of suffering, remember, art's still waiting for you, even in the dark, even in the silence, even when your own thoughts feel louder than any orchestra. And speaking of loud thoughts, there's another fear I should confess, a fear that used to keep me up longer than any migraine, the fear that I'd live and die, and no one would remember me at all. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever feared dying and no one caring? Like really caring? As in, one day you're alive and the next, the universe shrugs, erases your browser history, and keeps spinning as if you'd never existed. Because I have. More times than I'd like to admit. People imagine me as this towering intellect, utterly sure of my place in history. The truth? I spent half my life convinced I'd vanish without a trace, that my books would rot in dusty libraries, unread, unloved, that the only legacy I'd leave behind would be a few old photos of a man with a mustache large enough to block sunlight, or so I think. It's a strange thing, fearing oblivion, not just death itself, but being forgotten, as though your existence was nothing but a ripple that fades seconds after it touches the surface. Even when I was alive, I felt it creeping in. I'd publish a new book, pour my soul onto the page, and nothing. No reviews, no applause. Sometimes not even a polite insult in the press. Just silence. I'd wander through the streets of Basel or Turin, clutching my manuscripts, wondering if I was writing for anyone but the mosquito living in my beard. He, at least, seemed interested, even if his feedback was mostly buzzing disapproval. It wasn't just pride, it was terror. I needed to believe my words mattered, that the suffering I'd endured wasn't entirely meaningless, that maybe, somehow, I could slip a message into the future, like a note in a bottle cast into the ocean. And then there's your world. Oh, your world. You're surrounded by numbers that promise to measure whether you matter, likes, followers, views. You post something online, and you wait. 5 likes? Good day. 50 likes? Excellent day. 0 likes? Existential crisis. I see you. And I'd probably be the same. I'd hit refresh on my profile, waiting to see if anyone found me profound or funny, or at least mustache-worthy. Sometimes I wonder if my own fears were the original influencer anxiety. Will they quote me? Will they misquote me? Will they remember me at all? One of the darkest nights I remember was when I realized that no matter how hard I worked, the universe might remain indifferent. That I could pour my entire being into writing and still disappear without leaving a single dent. But then I had another thought. What if leaving a mark isn't the point? What if the real triumph is simply living, feeling, creating, even if no one notices? What if the value of life isn't measured by how many remember your name, but by how fiercely you burned while you were here? It took me years and many sleepless nights to understand this. But confidence, I realized, isn't built on applause. It's built on knowing that your existence has worth, even if it's invisible to the crowd. Some of you might be lying there tonight, staring at your phone, wondering why your posts get ignored, wondering if you've become invisible in a world obsessed with being seen. Let me tell you, you're not invisible. The ripple you make may not be loud, but it still travels outward in ways you can't imagine. A kind word, a small idea, a quiet piece of beauty. Those things endure, even when the algorithms say otherwise. I won't pretend I never cared about being remembered. Part of me still does. I mean, who doesn't want their mustache to get its own Wikipedia page one day? But I've learned to measure my worth differently. I've learned that writing a single true sentence matters, even if nobody reads it. That making art, loving people, fighting for your truth, these things give life weight, even in silence. And here's the funny twist. The words I feared would vanish ended up living far beyond me. People quote me now, sometimes without knowing what I meant. They tattoo my phrases on their ribs. They write me into memes and jokes. It's strange being famous after you're gone. You can't exactly enjoy the praise, or sign any book deals, or correct anyone who misinterprets you and says Nietzsche invented nihilism. I didn't, by the way. So if you're lying there tonight, haunted by the fear that you might slip through life unnoticed, remember, your worth isn't measured by echoes. It's measured by the light you carry, even when no one sees it. And speaking of being unseen, next, I want to talk about something that terrified me even more than being forgotten. The courage to be completely, unapologetically myself, even when nobody clapped. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever posted something online and gotten exactly 0 likes? Not a single heart. Not even one pity thumbs up from your aunt. Because let me tell you, that silence can feel louder than a stadium full of people booing. I felt it too. People love to imagine me as this unstoppable philosopher striding across Europe, mustache bristling with confidence, my every word destined for history books. Ha! Let me confess a secret. I spent years convinced I was riding into a void. When I was alive, my books barely sold. My publisher printed tiny runs. Often, I'd see my work stacked unsold in dusty corners of bookstores, or worse, repurposed as doorstops. I'd pour my soul into pages, my ideas blazing like comets, only to hear nothing. No applause, no arguments. Just silence so deep, it made me wonder if my mustache was absorbing all the sound waves. Or so I think. At first, it crushed me. I wanted to shout, "Doesn't anyone see what I'm trying to do here?" But slowly, painfully, I realized something crucial. Writing wasn't about applause. It was about truth. About saying the things that burned inside me, even if no one clapped. And let me tell you, that's still one of the hardest things any human can do. To be yourself, fully, even when the world responds with silence. Modern life hasn't made this any easier. You share your art, your writing, your ideas, and the algorithm either showers you in likes or buries you in digital oblivion. People measure their worth in engagement rates, followers, retweets, and I get it, because it's seductive to believe that validation equals value. But here's the truth. Applause is fickle. One day people love you. The next, they've moved on to a dancing cat video. If you tie your confidence to claps and cheers, you'll spend your whole life chasing a moving target. I remember once sitting in my small room, staring at a finished manuscript of Thus Spoke Zerahustra. I held it in my hands and thought, no one's going to read this. No one's going to care. And part of me wanted to throw it into the fireplace, along with the mosquito who'd been buzzing metaphysical critiques near my ear for days. But then I thought, so what? So what if no one reads it today, or tomorrow, or ever? The act of creating it mattered. The truth in those words existed, whether the world applauded or not. And that realization, bizarrely, made me feel free. Because confidence isn't about being loud or flashy. It's about standing in the quiet, with your heart exposed, saying, "Here I am. This is what I believe." Even if your audience is only you, and possibly an existentially inclined mosquito. You might be lying there tonight thinking of your own creations, your poetry, your music, your small kindnesses nobody noticed. Maybe you've poured yourself into something and felt crushed when the world seemed indifferent. I'm here to tell you, keep creating anyway. Keep being yourself, even when nobody claps. Because what you make might echo in ways you can't imagine. Years after I died, people started reading my words, quoting them, arguing about them, turning them into memes. Some even tattooed my aphorisms on their ribs. And trust me, nothing prepares you for the thought that your words might one day be inked permanently next to someone's spleen. Yet the irony is, those late recognitions didn't matter as much as I once believed they would. The true victory was that I dared to speak my mind at all. So, if you're lying there tonight, heart heavy with the fear that nobody cares about what you have to say, let me whisper this. Your voice matters, even if it echoes in an empty room right now. And if one day the world finally hears you, wonderful. But don't wait for applause to validate your existence. because your worth isn't measured by noise. It's measured by the quiet courage of showing up as yourself. And speaking of courage, next, I've got to tell you how even pain itself can turn into something strangely beautiful. Because, believe it or not, sometimes your deepest wounds become the places where new stars are born. Hey, still awake? Tell me this. Ever gone through hell and thought it looked kind of beautiful afterwards? I know, sounds insane. Who admires the scenery while their world burns? But sometimes, after the smoke clears, you stand there blinking, realizing you're stronger than you thought. That's the paradox of pain. Yeah, people love to quote me saying, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." I've seen it printed on t-shirts, coffee mugs, gym posters, and even inspirational cat calendars. I'm flattered, truly, though I'd like it noted that I didn't write it while bench pressing. Or so I think. When I first wrote that line, I wasn't flexing my philosophical muscles for Instagram likes. I was trying to survive. My life was a symphony of suffering, migraines that turned my skull into a drum, stomach pains that made me question every meal, friendships crashing and burning, and nights where the weight of existence felt like trying to lift Wagner's entire orchestra single-handedly. And yet, somehow, I kept moving forward. Pain has this twisted gift. It carves you open, hollowing you out, leaving you raw and trembling. But in that emptiness, something new can grow. Clarity, compassion, the fierce, blazing knowledge that you've survived. Your world today talks a lot about trauma and healing, therapy podcasts, self-care routines, apps promising to soothe your anxiety with gentle ocean sounds. I think that's wonderful. You deserve comfort, but I also think pain, in all its brutality, sometimes shapes us into the people we're meant to become. I'm not saying suffering is noble. I'm certainly not recommending you seek out migraines for character development. Believe me, I'd have traded my migraines for a quiet life and a less flamboyant mustache any day. But suffering showed me the boundaries of my own strength and how far I could push beyond them. Sometimes I'd lie in bed, certain my mind would shatter under the pressure of cosmic questions and physical agony, and yet dawn always arrived. My heart kept beating. Ideas kept coming. The same mind that tormented me also gave me visions that felt like glimpses into some secret architecture of existence. I think that's what people miss about resilience. It doesn't mean never breaking. It means discovering you're capable of rebuilding, even if the pieces don't fit the same way as before. Your world moves fast. You're told to bounce back instantly. Hustle. Keep smiling. Post cheerful updates, even when your insides feel like they've been drop-kicked by fate. But real strength isn't pretending everything's fine. It's standing in the wreckage, acknowledging the pain, and saying, "Okay, now what?" There were moments in my life when I believed I was finished, when the loneliness was so deep it felt like drowning in black ink, when even the mosquito in my beard fell silent, as though he too had given up delivering his philosophical TED Talks. But every time, some tiny spark kept me going, a line of music, a fleeting thought, the memory of laughter, or just stubborn curiosity about what might happen next. I've learned that confidence doesn't mean never hurting. It means carrying your scars with pride. It means letting your wounds shine instead of hiding them like shameful secrets. You might be lying there tonight thinking your pain has ruined you, that it's made you smaller, weaker, dimmer, let me tell you something radical. Your pain might be the forge where your brightest light is being born. I've seen people come through despair transformed, softer, wiser, kinder, able to see beauty others overlook, able to offer compassion because they've lived the darkness themselves. Pain sucks. There's no poetic way around that. But sometimes it carves channels through which new rivers can flow. So if you're awake tonight, feeling like life's been nothing but one long cosmic slap in the face, remember, the stars you see in the night sky were born in colossal explosions. Light often emerges from chaos, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. And speaking of chaos, next, I need to tell you why, despite all my talk of suffering and existential dread, I still believe it's worth dancing, even if you're standing on the edge of a volcano. Hey, still awake? Tell me this, ever wanted to dance, even if you've got two left feet? Or felt like there was a wild, burning energy inside you that needed to move, even if the world around you thought you were completely mad? Because let me tell you, my friend, that's one of the most human urges we've got. People think of me as this stern philosopher, locked in serious contemplation, scowling at humanity through my enormous mustache. They imagine me perched on a lonely mountain peak, brooding about eternal recurrence and cosmic dread. And yes, that was me sometimes. But here's the secret. I also believed in dancing, and not just waltzing at fancy parties, though I was spectacularly bad at that. I'm talking about the dance of life, the kind where your soul spins despite the chaos around you. Or so I think. I once wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. People quote that a lot. Sometimes they put it on inspirational posters featuring sparkly fonts and galaxies, but they often forget the deeper truth. Chaos isn't just mess. It's possibility. It's the raw material of creation. Chaos is why we invent art, music, poetry, even silly TikTok dances. It's why you scribble lyrics on napkins, why you dream up ideas in the shower, why your mind bursts with colors and patterns no one else can see. Without chaos, nothing new would ever happen. Life would be an endless spreadsheet, neat rows and columns with no surprises. And who wants to live inside a spreadsheet? But here's the paradox. Most people are terrified of chaos. Your world worships order, metrics, goals, perfect morning routines, manifesting your best life. Everyone's trying to control the mess, hide the weirdness, fit into the algorithm's favorite mold, and yet, it's often the people brave enough to dance in the chaos who change everything. The artists, the thinkers, the wild spirits who say, yes, the world is on fire, but I'm going to create something anyway. Sometimes that's me. Though, I'll be honest, my own chaos has gotten me into trouble more times than I can count. I've blown up friendships, walked away from jobs, written books so strange that the critics called me insane. And yes, occasionally I've stared into the abyss so long that the abyss started leaving passive-aggressive comments about my mustache. But even when it hurt, even when it left me alone and misunderstood, I've never regretted listening to that inner chaos, because that's where my truest self lives. Your world has a million voices telling you to calm down, blend in, stick to the script, but I'm here to tell you, keep your chaos. Let it whirl, let it spark, because that's the birthplace of stars and of confidence. Confidence isn't pretending your life is tidy. It's daring to dance on your volcano, even when lava's splashing at your feet. And let's be honest, Wagner would have turned dancing on a volcano into a 5-hour opera, complete with 17 brass sections and a chorus of sopranos wailing about destiny. Sometimes I'm grateful my own chaos was at least shorter than that. I remember one night in Turin. My mind was racing, my migraines were building into a storm, and I felt on the verge of collapsing. But as I stood outside under the dark sky, I suddenly felt a strange surge of joy, for no reason at all, just because the stars were glittering, because the cold air tasted sharp and alive, because, despite everything, I was still here. And in that moment, I wanted to laugh, to dance, even though nothing in my circumstances had changed. That's the power of chaos. It's the place where despair and ecstasy sometimes overlap, where you discover that your spirit can still move, even when your body is exhausted and the world looks bleak. Maybe your chaos is just the endless to-do lists piling up, or the fear that you'll never be enough, or the heartbreak you're still carrying like an invisible scar. But remember this, the chaos inside you is also creativity, courage, the part of you that refuses to give up. It's what makes you beautifully, uniquely you. So if you're lying there tonight, wide-eyed, feeling like your life is spinning in 20 directions, take a breath. Know that somewhere in that storm, your dancing star is waiting to be born. Speaking of stars, next, I think it's time for us to talk about endings, about nights that feel endless and the dawns that always come. Because even the longest night doesn't last forever, and I've got one last thing to tell you before we both try to sleep. You know, it's funny. We've been talking for hours now, wandering through my memories, my mistakes, my cosmic questions. And still, here we are, awake, together in the middle of the night. I suppose there's a strange comfort in that, knowing that somewhere you're lying there listening, eyes wide open, heart full of thoughts you can't quite silence. And me, rambling on like a man who's had too much strong coffee or too many metaphysical crises. So before we say goodnight, or at least try to, let me tell you one last thing. There's a particular silence that arrives in the very last stretch of the night. It's different from the earlier hours when your mind buzzes like a beehive, full of regrets, half-finished conversations, worries about tomorrow. This silence feels heavier, almost sacred, as if the universe itself is pausing to catch its breath. I used to lie there in that silence, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were pressing in, as if my own thoughts might crush me. My body aching, my temples pulsing like Wagner's brass section warming up, my mustache drooping under the weight of existential dread. Or so I think. But then, slowly, a different feeling would creep in, a tiny sense of wonder, a fragile kind of hope, like a single candle flickering in an endless cave. Because even at my lowest, part of me believed that dawn would come, that somehow light would find its way back into the world and into me, and it always did. Not because my problems vanished, not because my migraine suddenly disappeared or my books flew off the shelves, but because dawn is stubborn. It shows up whether you're ready or not, whether you've figured out your life or not, whether your mustache is having a good hair day or looking like a startled hedgehog. Some of my most profound insights arrived in that thin space between night and morning, when exhaustion stripped away my defenses and left me face to face with the raw machinery of my own soul. That's when I realized, even when everything feels meaningless, we keep going. Not because we're certain, but because there's always a chance that the next moment might contain something beautiful. Your world, with its endless notifications and glowing screens, tries to convince you that everything must have a quick fix, that every problem has a 5-step solution. But some nights, there's no fix. There's only enduring, breathing, letting time pass. And that's okay. You've probably noticed how I've talked all night about confidence, about standing your ground, about daring to be yourself even when the world misunderstands you. But there's one more piece to the puzzle, a quiet truth I want you to carry into the dawn. Confidence also means knowing when to surrender. Not surrender as in giving up, but as in loosening your grip on the wheel when you've been steering so hard you're shaking. It's allowing yourself to say, I don't have all the answers, and maybe that's all right. There's a strange strength in admitting you're small under the stars, that you're vulnerable, that sometimes you need to rest instead of fighting the whole universe. I used to believe I had to think my way out of every problem, that if I just analyzed deeply enough, I'd unlock some cosmic code and finally sleep peacefully. Spoiler alert, that code does not exist. I searched every corner of my mind and found, well, mostly migraines, and one persistent mosquito who still insists on quoting my own writings back at me. But I also found this. Sometimes the most courageous thing is to close your eyes and trust that dawn will come. So if you're lying there tonight, feeling crushed by all you haven't solved, by all the questions left hanging in the dark, I want you to remember, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to lay down your worries, even for a moment, because the world can wait. And yes, maybe you'll wake up tomorrow still unsure, still with questions, still carrying some quiet ache in your chest. But you'll also wake up alive. And that's no small thing. One of the great secrets of life is that we're never truly finished. We're always becoming, always unfolding, like stars forming in clouds of cosmic dust, like music emerging from silence, like mustaches that, no matter how unruly, keep growing back. Or so I think. You might not see the shape of your journey yet. You might feel lost, directionless. But somewhere in this night, in the swirl of your thoughts, seeds are being planted. Ideas are taking root. A new kind of strength is quietly forming. So if the mosquito in my beard is still awake, at least we're not alone. We're fellow insomniacs, sharing the same strange hour, breathing the same quiet air, and together we've survived another long, dark night. Before I go, let me leave you with this. Your doubts don't define you. Your mistakes don't doom you. Your sleepless nights don't mean you've failed. You are still here, still fighting, still searching for meaning in the spaces between the stars. And that, my friend, is proof that hope never truly dies. So tonight, even if sleep doesn't come, let your body rest. Let your mind drift. Listen to the hush of the night, and remember, even the longest darkness cannot hold back the dawn forever. Good night.